Hello, everybody. We're going to get going on chapter one here. So, chapter one, covers taking risks and making profits within the dynamic business environment. So, kind of a great opening chapter here. I'm going to lay down some pretty easy, concepts for you to understand. If you've never taken a business class before, don't have to worry about anything. These are really easy concepts. And yeah, we're just going to get going here. So in this chapter, we're going to be covering business and wealth building, the importance of entrepreneurs to the creation of wealth, the business environment, and then the evolution of U.S. business. So the first example here, I thought was a really good example to just kind of show kind of your typical American dream here and how business has helped this individual especially here. So Anne Marie Campbell for Home Depot. So she immigrated from Jamaica and began a job at Home Depot to pay for college. She earned her MBA and then worked her way up to executive vice president in 2016. She works to provide opportunities for advancement to employees. So like I said, I thought this was a really good example to show you, if you start someplace, work your way up through the ladder over a long period of time, you can make great things happen. And I mean, that's kind of one of the things I hope you get out of this class is just kind of the understanding that success isn't going to happen overnight. It's one of those things that, it takes a long time to get ahead in life. And like I said, this is a great example of that. So the first concept here is business. So a business is any activity that seeks to provide goods and services to others while operating at a profit. You look around the landscape, anything's a business. Whether it be Walmart, Amazon, McDonald's. I mean, those are just some really popular businesses. Even Lincoln Land Community College, we're in the business of providing an education for individuals. We're a not-for-profit business, but we are still a business. For this next one, goods. So any tangible products such as computers, food, clothing, cars, appliances, pretty much anything that you're buying that you can put your hands on. Services here, intangible products that can't be held in your hand, such as education, healthcare, insurance, recreation, and travel. I do junior achievement with like third and fourth grade kids, and these are the same concepts that we use in those classes. So the example that I always use for services is if they go and get their hair cut, if they pay for somebody to wash their car, if they pay for somebody to come clean the room, something along those lines. Those are really good examples to use whenever we're talking about services and just kind of that easy to understand. So an entrepreneur, like I said, I do a lot with JA. Entrepreneurship is a very big topic in JA. It's going to be kind of the overall topic of this chapter, if you will. So an entrepreneur is someone who risks time and money to start and manage a business. Started looking around. I mean, some of the entrepreneurs that come to mind, Jeff Bezos with Amazon, Steve Jobs with Apple, pretty much anybody who started a business that's going to be an entrepreneur. So whoever the founder might be, even here locally, I'm trying to think of some of the local business, the Bun Factory. I forget the original Bun's name. He was an entrepreneur at one point. Now it's turned into this multinational corporation, but at one point it started out with just one guy. He had an idea, and went from there. For revenues, profits, and losses. So revenue, the total amount of money a business takes in during a given period of time by selling goods and services. Profit, the amount of money a business earns above and beyond what it spends for salaries and other expenses, and then loss when a business expenses are more than its revenues. So really good example of revenue, profit, and loss is like a lemonade stand. So if you have a lemonade stand and you go out, you buy all of your groceries for it. You've got your sugar, you've got your lemons, you've got your water and everything. Say you spent $5 on all of the supplies for your lemonade stand. Now you're selling glasses at $1 each. You go out and you sell 10 glasses. So your revenue is going to be $10. And then your profit on that is going to be your revenue minus your expenses on it. So your profit is going to be at $5 because you spent $5 on all of your groceries for the lemonade stand. So pretty good profit that you made. I mean, you doubled up. Now, at a loss, if you were to go out and spend $10, maybe you went all organic, you got the organic sugar, you got the organic lemons and everything, so everything was a little more expensive, and you spent $10 on everything, and you only sold 8 glasses, then at that point you would be operating at a $2 loss. So that's a really good example to use whenever you're talking about revenue, profit, and loss. Obviously, when you get into some of these bigger corporations, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into play as far as tax deductions, you know. Estimated earnings, different things like that. And we won't go into a whole lot of detail with stuff like that. And we'll go over like kind of some financial records here later on in the semester, but this is just kind of a good basic level for you to understand. Risk. So whenever you're starting a business, obviously there's a lot of risk associated with it. So the risk is the chance an entrepreneur takes of losing time and money on a business that may not provide or prove profitable. Not all enterprises make the same amount of profit. Businesses take risks, but with big risk could come big profits. That could also come with big losses. So, I mean, you just kind of have to weigh the outcomes of that. So, a really good example of this is Gerald Foss in 1979 took 5,000 oversized foam fingers to the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, not knowing if he would sell a single one. So, fortunately, the Sugar Bowl crowd liked them. He sold every last finger and launched a company that is still going strong. What risks and rewards did Foss face when starting his business? So, I mean, in 1979, I mean, he's really kind of going out on a limb. He didn't have the internet to kind of provide him any sort of like guidance, or he couldn't put a poll out there on Facebook asking if somebody wants his foam fingers. So, I mean, this was pretty much all risk. As far as just kind of the expenses that he had going into it, I mean, he had to go out, he had to buy the foam, he had to buy paint for the fingers. If he had, anything to cut them with, whether it be scissors, or maybe he went out and he ended up getting like a mold for him. I mean, that's just another added expense along with that. And then he also has his time to consider on here. So he ended up taking 5,000 of them down there. But I'm not sure how long it took him to make each one of them. But I mean, say he's got an hour invested into each one of those. I mean, that's 5,000 hours invested into all these foam fingers. Now, I'm assuming it probably took him a little less time than that. But overall, I mean, you just kind of have to figure out, how much is your time worth. So, I mean, if you're working at a job right now making 15 bucks an hour, that might be like a good gauge as to, do you think your time is worth more than that? Do you think it's less than that, depending on how easy of a job it is? I mean, do you like what you're doing? That sort of thing. So all these are risks and factors that you have to take in whenever you're, thinking about starting a business or, working for another business. So the next two slides, we're going to be talking about standard of living and quality of life. So standard of living, just the amount of goods and services people can buy with the money that they have. I would say here in Central Illinois, Illinois in general, and just in the United States, we have a great standard of living. I would say our standard of living is pretty much top notch in the Midwest. You go into some of these, smaller towns, maybe their standard of living not as high as someplace like here in Springfield or something along those lines, but, you kind of give and take with everything. So like it says here, the United States has one of the highest standards of living in the world. Workers in other countries may make more money, but prices for products are higher. So quality of life, just like I said, United States, we've got a great quality of life here as well. So just the general well-being of society in terms of its political freedom, natural environment, education, healthcare, safety, amount of leisure, and rewards that add to the satisfaction and joy of other goods and services provide. Overall, I would say our quality of life is pretty much second to none. I know the news likes to, talk about how the world is going downhill, and all of our politicians are kind of saying the same thing, but overall, I mean, the United States in my mind is still the top of every country in the world. So whenever you're looking across the landscape, think about small third world countries who don't have access to power or even like indoor plumbing, something along those lines. I mean, you have to take all of that into consideration. I mean, just like political freedom, you might have some place like China is doing really well now. It's one of the top powers in the world. But as far as political freedom go, they don't necessarily have nearly as much freedom as we have in the United States. So, I mean, I was just watching something on 60 Minutes not that long ago where it was saying, anybody who kind of talks bad about China is kind of put on a black list. And, the government kind of steps in, they kind of shut them down and they kind of shut them up. So, here in the United States, I mean, you're open to pretty much say whatever you want to about, the politicians and everything like that, just because, I mean, that's covered by, the First Amendment, freedom of speech. So, I mean, that's a pretty cool thing that we do have here in the United States. And there are other countries that have, other freedoms along with it. But when you take into consideration all of these things here, like I said, I would consider the United States to be second to none. So, when responding to various business stakeholders, whenever you're thinking about a business, there's tons of stakeholders involved. So, what is a stakeholder exactly? So, it's all the people who stand or gain to lose by the policies and activities of a business whose concerns and business needs to address. So, on this next slide, we'll kind of go over all the stakeholders involved. So, starting here, you've got your stockholders. If it's a publicly traded company, these are the people who have stock in the company. Even if it's a private company that's only owned by 3 different people, those 3 different people are going to be considered your stockholders in that situation. You've got the customers, the people that you're selling to, surrounding community. I mean, that's the community around you and the community that you're in and selling. One of the great examples that I always like to use whenever we're talking about surrounding community is, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, Sriracha had a really big controversy with their factory. So they were saying, like, if you were within like a 3 to 5 mile radius, you could definitely smell like the chili peppers coming from the Sriracha factory. And even if you were really close to the Sriracha factory, like your eyes would burn. Now, I love Sriracha, but I don't want to live anywhere near that factory just because of the risks associated with that. I mean, I don't want my eyes burning just because I'm living next to a Sriracha factory. So that was one of the things that kind of come out of that is, what are they going to do to kind of remedy the situation? Are they going to use, better filters in their factories and that sort of thing? So, definitely need to think about the surrounding community, because if you don't have a good relationship with the community around you, you can't necessarily have a good relationship with your customer base, just because, I mean, it is going to start out with the surrounding community. This next one, environmentalists, kind of go along the same lines with that. If you're dealing with a toxic product, environmentalists are kind of going to be all over you as to, how are you handling your toxic products? What are you doing with toxic waste? You can't be just pumping that into the ground. There's been a lot of lawsuits over the year with, toxic waste being, put into streams and rivers and polluting, drinking water, and then people coming back many years later, and suing for those situations. I mean, a classic example of that is just kind of the movie Aaron Brockovich. It's a really good movie if you haven't seen it. And it's just a really good example of, how one company's decision can affect so many lives. And it's not just, one generation. It can linger on for, generations. So definitely a good movie to watch. You got your dealers or your retailers, good example of that, for car dealerships, Chevy, they produce for the dealers, and then the dealers sell the product to them. Employees, anybody that's working for the company or working for you. You've got your government leaders, whether it be, on a state, local level, even, United States senators, congressmen and women, president, anything along those lines. You've got your suppliers, where you get your supplies from to make your product. You got the media, whether it be local media, national media, and then this final one here, bankers. So with every organization, you need to rely on some sort of benefactor. So that benefactor is, either going to be a bank or a credit union. They're going to be able to provide you, lines of credit and different things like that. That's going to be able to help you expand in your business, and then also just cover, payroll and different things like that. One of these, right here, outsourcing is a pretty common term that you'll hear throughout business courses, and it's kind of a hot topic as well. So outsourcing is contracting with other companies, often in other countries, to do some of the functions of a firm, like production or accounting. So a really good example, a lot of people, this might be the first thing to come to mind, is just, call centers. Whenever you're calling, Comcast or, Verizon, DirecTV, whoever, chances are you're probably not going to get somebody in the United States. It's probably going to be somebody overseas, whether it be in Europe or Asia or someplace like that. That's kind of like your stereotypical, example for outsourcing. And then down here, so many foreign companies are opening offices and factories in the United States, which is called insourcing. Um, so if you do have somebody who has like, a big presence, over, in like Europe or something like that, and that's where they're headquartered at. If they're using the United States for, some of their business practices, that would be insourcing in that situation. So, nonprofit organization. So this is an organization whose goals do not include making a personal profit for its owners or organizers. So nonprofit organizations use financial gains to meet social or educational goals. So, like I said earlier, like Lincoln Land Community College, we are a not-for-profit organization. There are colleges out there that are for-profit. So a couple that come to mind are just like Phoenix University, University of Phoenix, the online college there. Pretty much anything that you're seeing online or through the TV for commercials, stuff like that, like these online degrees, most of those are for-profit organizations. Some of the other examples of not-for-profit organizations here that might come to mind are United Way, American Heart Association, Salvation Army, American Cancer Society, American Red Cross. So all these organizations, are doing good in the United States and in the world for that matter. Whether it's helping out with disaster recovery, United Way, they help out with a lot of like local charities, whether it be Boys and Girls Club, different things along those lines. So all of these, it's more about just kind of helping out for the greater good. They're not interested in making profits. They're just mainly worried about just kind of the overall health of the country and the world. So a really good example here with the Red Cross is the Red Cross provides assistance to around 30 million people annually, from refugees to victims of natural disasters. So why do good management principles apply equally to profit-seeking businesses and nonprofit organizations? So when we think about this, we think about for-profit organizations. We'll use Walmart for an example. Employees, they rely on Walmart management, make sure that they're keeping their jobs. Us as consumers, we rely on Walmart because we need to go there. We need to get our groceries. We need to get, anything else that we're buying at Walmart. But from a not-for-profit standpoint, why do they need good management? Well, they need good management just because they have just as many people relying on them. So, Red Cross, just like it says here, they have 30 million people annually that they're helping. So those 30 million people are relying on American Red Cross. So if that organization is not well run, what's going to happen with those 30 million people, especially in those tough situations like natural disasters or, refugee situations. So it's equally important that these organizations, have good management for non-for-profit. So with not-for-profit, you definitely want to keep, the best employees. One of the downsides to not-for-profit is you're not going to make as much money working for a not-for-profit, but the work itself is going to be much more rewarding than working for a for-profit organization. So some of the things that they're doing to help, keep these employees at not-for-profit are offer flexible schedules. Maybe working, 4 days a week instead of 5. Set ambitious but realistic goals. Typically, individuals that work for not-for-profit are very passionate about what they're doing, and they're very goal-driven. So if you set ambitious goals for them, they're going to want to attain those goals. Number 3 here, allow all employees to work with the groups that they are serving. So, if you're working for the Red Cross, you're going out to help with the refugees or in those disaster situations, and you see firsthand exactly what your work is doing and, how it's affecting the world. So, that can be a really rewarding experience for those individuals that are working for the not-for-profits. And then number 4 here, give employees a break. Not-for-profit work is draining. So, yeah, if you're going out to help with refugees, I can only imagine how draining that would be, especially, I mean, if you're going to, a foreign country or something like that, you're away from your family for extended periods of time, probably getting, little sleep, you're probably not having the best diet while you're out there. So, I mean, if you are gone for a long time, you need to come home at some point. You need to recuperate and that sort of thing. So, and that's the thing. Kind of goes back to this. Offer flexible schedules to where you probably have a couple of weeks off. After you get back from like a big, trip like a refugee trip, or if you're dealing with a natural disaster or something along those lines. So one of the things that we're going to talk about here in the next few slides is just being an entrepreneur, but also about the positives and negatives about being an entrepreneur. So some of you might be taking the class because you want to start a business or become an entrepreneur, and that's great. But the one thing that with being an entrepreneur is it is a lot of work, and a lot of people just kind of look at the upsides of it and they never consider these downsides down here. So we'll go over kind of both of them and how they relate with one another. So the first one here, we've got, the positives to being an entrepreneur, freedom to succeed. You are your own boss. You can pretty much kind of do whatever you want to. You can make your own decisions, and then possible wealth. So, I mean, kind of that stereotypical thing that we always think of is, entrepreneurs are somebody who make a lot of money. They just kind of, do whatever they want to. And, that is the case, with a lot of people. But what you don't think about is what's going on behind the scenes, is how much time that they're putting into that work. So some of the negatives of being an entrepreneur is, you do have the freedom to fail. It's completely on you. No paid vacations, no health insurance. So, I work for CEFCU, so, I get quite a bit of vacation time where I can leave the office. I don't have to worry about anything while I'm gone. They provide me with health insurance. They provide me with a 401k, a pension, different things like that. If you're an entrepreneur, that's completely on you. So you've got to figure out, what you're going to do for health insurance. You've got to figure out what you're going to do for a retirement plan. Like I said here, no paid vacations. If you're starting out as an entrepreneur and you're trying to get this business up and going, chances are you're probably not going to take a vacation for probably the first 3 to 5 years that you're starting this business, just because you need to be working at it every day to make sure that the business succeeds. And even if you are on vacation, you're probably going to be worrying about your business the entire time that you're on vacation. I know quite a few entrepreneurs who are doing various things, and even when they're on vacation, they probably still spend 4 to 5 hours a day, answering emails. They're on their phone. They're working on different deals. So, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of work when it comes to being an entrepreneur. So, I highly recommend anybody to become an entrepreneur, just because we do need them in this country. But at the same time, I mean, consider everything that is going into being an entrepreneur, such as the risk associated with it, and all the work that's associated with it as well. So the importance of entrepreneurs in this country. So it creates wealth for its citizens. A country requires more than natural resources. It needs the efforts of entrepreneurs and skill and knowledge to produce goods and services. So kind of going back to our first example of a lemonade stand, how can government support entrepreneurship and spread knowledge? One of the things that comes to mind is just, tax rates, taxing small companies and small businesses at a lesser rate. And when I say small businesses, that's something that, when somebody thinks of a small business, we probably think of kind of like a mom and pop shop that's only got, maybe 5 employees or less, something like that. Whereas, small business is technically classified as a business that is 500 employees or less. So when you look around, I mean, there's tons of businesses that are 500 employees or less. So, I mean, that's just kind of a weird thing to think about when you think about 500 people. I mean, that's quite a few people, so you think, oh, that's a pretty big business. Well, according to the United States, that's technically a small business. So then the other thing here is, spreading the knowledge. So like I said earlier, I do quite a bit with junior achievement. So I'm going into classrooms and talking to 3rd, 4th, 5th graders about becoming an entrepreneur and kind of what business is, that sort of thing. Now that is not a government-backed organization, but that is a organization that the government fully supports, and the schools support us coming in and talking to those kids. So I mean, I think that's a great way to spread knowledge and kind of get kids interested from an early standpoint on what is business and how they can contribute to business later on in life. So we've got the 5 factors of production here. So we've got land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and knowledge. So I would say when it comes to the United States, we're top notch when it comes to the 5 factors of production. So whenever you look at land and natural resources, I mean, we're a very diverse country as far as natural resources go. I mean, whether you're going from Pacific Northwest all the way down to the Southeast, I mean, there's tons of different land and natural resources that we have to offer here. Labor, we have a great workforce in the United States, individuals that are willing to work. We've got quite a bit of capital here in the United States where we've got banks to back us up. We've got angel investors or capital investments, different things like that. If you've got an idea, you can go to those places, get capital to start with your organization and your business and get going from there. We've got entrepreneurship, just the overall ideas that you're having and wanting to start a business, and then finally knowledge here. With knowledge, maybe you've got a pretty good working knowledge of what you want to do with your business, but there might be things that maybe you're not an expert on. Maybe it's something like e-commerce, accounting, human resources, just different factors that go into play whenever you're starting a business. And for those situations, you can always reach out to somebody else who has that knowledge in it. And like I said, we have a great workforce here in the United States. So I mean, you're always going to be able to find somebody who has the knowledge and who's willing to work for it, just as long as you're willing to pay them. So as far as the business environment goes, the surrounding factors that either help or hinder the development of a business. So we're talking about economic and legal environment. So here, just even locally in Springfield or in Illinois, I feel like we have a pretty good economic and legal environment. Our taxes are pretty high, but overall, I feel like we have a great workforce behind us that's willing to work. And then as far as an economy goes, the state is not in the best situation, but I do feel like it could be a lot worse. When you start looking around, I'll use someplace like Detroit as an example. Detroit is kind of on the up for the time being, but when you look at where it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago, Detroit was in a really bad situation. They tried to file bankruptcy just because the overall city was just losing money left and right. And I was up in Detroit. It was probably about 10 years ago now. It was just an eerie place. There were, really tall buildings and skyscrapers that were just abandoned. No business wanted to be part of Detroit. And now, like I said, it's on the up. You've got organizations that are going back to Detroit just because land is so cheap there. They can get office space really cheap. They've got a pretty young workforce up there that's wanting to see Detroit thrive again. But at the same time, they still have a lot of work ahead of them. So when you look here, even locally here at Springfield, I feel like we have a pretty good situation. We don't have that many abandoned buildings. Like that, and just overall we do have troubles with the state and that sort of thing, but at the same time we still are functioning on a day-to-day basis. Number 2, we have technological environment. So just as far as the technology that's around us, the great thing about technology is it's anywhere pretty much in the world as long as you have access to the internet. When you think about top technology, you think about Silicon Valley out in California, but even so, we have some up and coming small kind of cities that have younger workforces that some of these tech companies are going to. So you've got Nashville, Kansas City. Austin, Texas is like another kind of Silicon Valley in the making, really. Competitive environment. So looking around, whether it be locally within your state or like in your region, to see what kind of companies are doing the same thing as you. What kind of companies are going to be your competition within, like I said, within your state, within your region, that sort of thing, and looking beyond that. Social environment. So, as far as culture goes, kind of what kind of culture is around you? Is it a very diverse culture? Is it just kind of, only one culture, that sort of thing? I feel like here in Central Illinois, we're not as diverse as some place like Chicago. But for the most part, we are still pretty diverse, culture. So the last one, global business environment, and that's just going on a bigger spectrum as to what's kind of happening around the world. So the economic and legal environment, just kind of going over that one more time. So allowing private ownership of business, minimizing interference with free exchange of goods and services, passing laws that enable business people to write enforceable contracts, establishing currency that's tradable in world markets, and minimizing corruption. Most of these examples kind of go on a bigger scale of kind of what's happening here in the United States. Really good example right here. So differences between countries. So starting a business is more difficult in some countries than in others. In India, for example, it takes time-consuming and bureaucratic process to obtain government permission. So what do you think would be the effect of a little more freedom to create business opportunities in this country of over 1 billion people? So just kind of like what it says here, I mean, there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape that you have to go through in order to just start a business. I mean, that's why, here in the United States, I feel like we have an advantage at that point where, anybody can start a business just as long as they have a good idea and they're willing to work at it. So corruption worldwide, we've got, the least corrupt countries and the most corrupt companies or countries. One of the things I was, thinking about the other day when I was looking at the slide is, kind of how are they deciding, who is on this list and that sort of thing, which, I'm sure it was some sort of poll. But, you look over here, you've got Denmark, New Zealand, Finland, Sweden, Switzerland, pretty good places to live from what I've heard. Over here under most corrupt, you've got Somalia, South Sudan, North Korea, Syria, Yemen. When you look at all these, I mean, they kind of have, dictators for their governments. A couple of, North Korea here, they're under, communism, that sort of thing. I mean, it really comes down to, what kind of government is the government able or enabling people to kind of go out and use, free speech? Are they able to kind of express themselves? Are they able to open up their own businesses, that sort of thing? Where in all these most corrupt countries over here, they don't have a whole lot of freedom to do things like that. So technological environment. So technology, everybody pretty much knows what technology is. So everything from phones to computers, various software programs, so on and so forth. How technology benefits workers and you. Overall effectiveness, just producing the desired result. Efficiency, producing goods and services using the least amount of resources. And productivity, the amount of output you generate given the amount of input. So, I mean, a really good example of this is just a calculator. I mean, think about whenever the calculator first came out. If you didn't have a calculator, you'd probably spend a lot more time trying to figure out, a really difficult equation. Now we just go on our phones, we go on our computer, we can figure out a pretty complex equation in a matter of seconds. So I always like to use that example whenever it comes to being effective, efficient, and just saving time with productivity. So e-commerce, I kind of mentioned that a little bit ago. So just the buying and selling of goods over the internet. So a couple of terms to remember along with e-commerce or B2C, business to consumer, and business to business or B2B. So business to consumer, I mean, that's going to kind of be your situation, kind of like a Walmart where it's going, from the business directly to you, the consumer. Business to business, that's going from one company to another. Somebody who is, Walmart, for example, if they're getting, dog food from, organization, that's going to be a business to business transaction. One of the things that they don't cover here is a C to C, which is a consumer to consumer. So something along those lines would be kind of like eBay, where, I'm selling Joe Schmo something just through eBay. So one of the things here is talking about cyber attacks on businesses. So as we've gotten more reliant on technology, cyber attacks has become, much bigger thing. Especially when you look around here in the news, it seems like every week there's another cyber attack and kind of being thrown out there. When you look at Facebook, they're in the news every day right now with everything that's going on with them as far as just kind of like their data breach and everything like that. So we've got 100% of businesses that suffered a cyber attack in 2015 experienced viruses, and 97% were through malware. So 59% were victims of phishing. So like phishing, that's just somebody who opened up like a email from an unknown place, and then that email probably contained some sort of virus. They were able to get into the organization that how. That's working at a financial institution. Phishing is a very big, subject with us, and if we don't recognize an email, like we can't open it. So only 36% were victims of stolen equipment. Cyber attacks costs are expected to reach $2 trillion by 2019. So we're in 2019 right now. So I'd really be interested to see kind of what that number is if it did reach $2 trillion. So I know the book takes a couple of years to be written, so I don't have the exact data on that right now. Most of the damage is due to business disruption and information loss. So when you think about, if somebody does, hack into, organization, I mean, they're going to be able to disrupt business, but then just think of the after effects of everything. So, there's going to be an investigation that goes along with it. I mean, they're going to have to go back and they're going to have to look at the security and everything associated with that. So, I mean, it can just be, really time consuming and difficult thing for the business. So along with technological environment, using technology to be responsive to customers. So you've got your database, which is an electronic storage file for information, whether that's an in-house or out-of-house database. Identity theft, something that I see on a daily basis. The obtaining individuals' personal information such as social security number, credit card numbers for illegal purposes. Being in the financial institutions. Like I said, we see this on a daily basis where, somebody is either, calling in or coming in, claiming to be somebody else to, either get funds out of their account. I mean, I feel like we do a pretty good job of, being very conservative with, checking IDs, if we're talking over the phone, asking them, various security questions, but, we still do have identity theft out there, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. So, that's just kind of the nature of the business. So using technology for customers, I really like this slide because it kind of goes into one of the things that Disney is doing to kind of help out with their customers and their visitors down at Disney World. So Walt Disney World introduced the MyMagic Plus, which is a convenient way for guests to create their ideal vacation experience. The key element is the Magic Band, providing an all-in-one way to effortlessly connect all the vacation choices guests make online. The Magic Band uses RF technology. So essentially what you can do on this Magic Band is you can upload funds to it, and depending on what kind of access level you have at Disney World, you can get into different theme parks down there. You can go to rides. You can just flash the band whenever you're going to get something to eat or something to drink, something like that, and then that way you don't have to carry a wallet, you don't have to carry anything extra for you, and you can just go online with their app and just kind of recharge it with extra funds or whatever you might need for it. So really kind of a cool innovation that Disney has, and other organizations are going towards that as well. When you think about like RFID and different chips, I know like one of the ideas that has always been kind of floated out there is at grocery stores, just having RFID, and that's where you don't actually have to go through a checkout line anymore. RFID chips would just be put onto anything that you're buying, and you just walk out the door. It scans it as you go out the door, and then it just bills you, or the grocery store bills you later on. So that's kind of a out there concept, but I don't think we're that far away. And for those of you that don't know what RFID, I can't remember exactly what RFID stands for, but essentially what it is it's a chip that kind of will be scanned and let you know either how much something is or where it is, that sort of thing. So just kind of like a tracking chip, if you will. So protecting yourself from identity theft, follow these steps to help protect yourself. So protect your social security number. If you do have your social security in your wallet, I would highly advise taking that out, keeping it in a safe place at home. If you have a safe, definitely put it in that. Shred financial documents and items with personal information. Most of you, if not all of you, are getting to the point in your lives where if you're not a full-fledged adult, you're going to be a full-fledged adult pretty soon here. So I would highly advise getting a shredder. That was probably one of the best purchases I ever made, just because you do get quite a bit of mail still sent to your home, and you can shred those documents. You don't have to worry about people getting your personal information. Don't give out personal information unless you know whom you are dealing with, especially online or over the phone. One of the biggest things that I see from a financial institution standpoint is people who are on Facebook asking for financial, information like credit card information. Like, don't get on Facebook and give people your information. That is one of the biggest scams. The really big scam going on right now is somebody will ask for your address on Facebook and say, I'm going to send you a check. Can you go cash this check and then send me $200 out of it? So people will come in with these $1,000 checks, they'll cash them, and then they'll think that they get to keep $800 and send $200 to the person that they met online, when in reality it was a fake check. And then the person who cashed it is on the hook now for $1,000. So any type of situation that you see online that even somewhat reflects that, just stay away from it completely. Using strong passwords, can't stress that enough. Using passcodes on all your devices, especially if you're doing a lot of stuff with your cell phone, definitely use a passcode. iPhones now, whether you have an older generation or a new one, the newer ones have the face recognition, the older ones have the thumbprint recognition. And I think more and more companies are going towards that thing, but definitely use your passcodes, just because there is so much information on your cell phones that people can get, especially if you do use things like Google Wallets, Apple Pay, different things like that. I mean, it wouldn't be anything for somebody to get on your cell phone, look up that information, and be able to steal your financial information. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, never click on links on suspicious emails, or if you don't know where the email came from. Now, like, one of the big things also is with like robocalling. Don't answer phone calls that you don't know as well. And then monitor your credit report. That is one big thing that I always try to kind of preach to customers that I have come in and talk to me, is always go out. You are able to look at your credit report once per year for free at annualcreditreport.com. So you can always go out there, you can look at what your credit report is, see if there's anything out there that shouldn't be out there, whether it be from a collection standpoint, or whether, like if somebody opened up a credit card that you didn't authorize, and then that way you can reach out to those organizations and say, hey, I didn't authorize that credit card. They can go in, do their research, and hopefully close that down from the start. So the business environment is a very competitive environment. Customers want good quality products at low prices with great customer service. So it's not just something these days where you provide a good quality product. You also need to have great customer service along with that. You need to provide service with a smile. Just because, you can pretty much get a product anywhere, especially if you go online to Amazon. You don't even have to deal with people really. So if you are going into someplace like a Walmart and dealing with somebody in person, you want to make sure you provide them with the best customer service possible, just because those people are taking time out of the day to come see you. So you want to make sure that they leave very satisfied. Because businesses is more customer driven, some managers give frontline employees more decision-making power, empowerment. So just giving frontline workers the responsibility, authority, freedom, training, and the equipment they need to respond quickly to customer requests. One of the things that happens in like my line of business is if you have somebody who comes in and they have a $10,000 check and they're wanting to cash that check, is just giving the teller the authorization to okay that $10,000 transaction, and not getting a manager's approval for it or something along those lines. So the social environment, demography, the statistical study of the human population with regards to its size, density, and other characteristics such as race, age, race, gender, and income. So we're going to go over that here in the next few slides. So demographics by age here in the United States. So whether you're, baby boomer, Generation Y, Generation Z, millennial, all of this is covered here. So, as you're starting to look here, baby boomers, 55, 64, 65 and over, they're kind of covering, 25% of the population here. But when you look here, under 18, that's a really big segment of the population that we have here in the United States. So, we do have a boom going on with the younger generation. It's not going to be very long before this underage, under 18 age group starts to kind of overpower these older generations here. So current demographics by race here in the United States. So 72% of the United States is white. Got 16.3% Hispanic, 12.6% Black, and then Asian is 9.1%. So projected demographics by 2050 in race. So white dropped down to 47%, Hispanic up to 29%, Black at 13%, and Asian at 9%. The one big thing here is Hispanic going up to 29%. I mean, that's just going to be something that we're going to start to see, increase over time, is just the amount of Latino individuals that are coming into the United States. So, I mean, I don't know how many of you have taken Spanish classes in the past. If you haven't taken Spanish classes, I'd probably advise taking it just because, I mean, becoming bilingual is becoming a very big thing in the United States right now. My wife is a Spanish teacher, actually, so I've been having her teach me a few things here and there. Just I took Spanish classes in high school, didn't think I was ever going to need it. Now that, I'm working in the business world, with CEFCU, we actually have offices out in San Jose, California. So a lot of our workforce is bilingual, so they can speak Spanish, they can speak English, and that's just really helped out kind of in my own career, being able to kind of pick up on different things in the Spanish language. So not very well versed in it right now. Hopefully that will change in the future, but I would definitely recommend you getting into some sort of Spanish class, whether it be at Lincoln Land, if you haven't taken any classes in high school. So continue on with the social environment. We've got managing diversity. Diversity has grown from just recruiting, monitoring female or minority and female workers. I mean, it's much larger now. We have people all over the world, coming for these organizations to work. I used to work for State Farm up in Bloomington, so I always think about them and how diverse their organization is. I mean, they have people from all over the world. So whether it be from Asia, Europe, Africa, here in North America, I mean, you can pretty much talk to somebody from a different continent every day of the week when I was working at State Farm. So it's just kind of crazy how everybody comes together for that organization. So the increase in the number of older citizens, so people aged 65 to 74 are currently the richest demographic group, just because, they worked their entire lives, they saved up, that sort of thing. So, I mean, for them to be the richest demographic, not that it's all that surprising. But with that, retired people will be draining the economy of wealth due to Social Security. So I'm trying to think, what is it, 60, I think 65 right now, you're able to draw Social Security. So, as these baby boomers are getting a little bit older, starting to draw Social Security, going to be draining it pretty quick, and there's not enough people in the younger workforce to replenish that. So we're kind of going to run into, tough situation with Social Security down the line, and that's something that the politicians are going to have to figure out at some point. So also here, the increase in the number of single-parent families. So growth of single-parent households has encouraged businesses to implement programs such as family leave and flex time. I know, like, a lot of organizations provide a lot more, maternity leave or paternity leave now. A lot of them offer in-house daycare. So, I mean, a lot of organizations are kind of addressing that situation and helping out with, with those single parents. And I mean, not even just single parents. I mean, you do have more individuals who, if they are married, both parents are working now, and that doesn't leave a whole lot of time for the kids at home. So if there is like in-house daycare at your organization that you're working at, that just helps out everybody involved. And then that way, if you do have in-house daycare, you can go visit your kids on lunch break or whenever you get a break from work at your office. So diversity in age, the U.S. workforce is widely diverse in terms of age, which means that managers must adapt to the generational demographics of the workplace. What are some of the challenges of working with someone much younger or much older than you? So with that, the biggest thing that I've run to is just different styles of working. The older generation, they kind of live to work. They come in every day, they're in the office by 7 o'clock, they put in the time, they're out of the office at 5 o'clock, and working kind of is their life. Whereas the younger generation, they're just kind of, working to live, where they want to come in late, they want to leave early, they would rather have much more flex time. They can get a lot of things done on their own at home, that sort of thing. Whereas, the older generation, they want to be at the office if they're working. So that's been the biggest thing that I've seen, as far as the older generation and the younger generation, and just the differences between the two. Obviously, you have different styles between the two. I'm not going to say which one is better, which one is worse. I'm the younger generation, so obviously I like to have a little more flexibility when it comes to my working, but that's just my preference. Like we talked about, single parent families, more and more working families consist of single parents who must juggle the demands of a job and responsibilities of raising children. What can managers do to try to retain valued employees who face such challenges? I've got quite a few employees that work for me who are single parents. And in those situations, I just try to be as flexible as possible with them. I mean, you can never predict when your kid is going to get sick, when they're going to need to go to the doctor. A lot of the times, individuals will come to me and say, hey, my kid has, a baseball game, or they have a dance recital, whatever it might be. Can I get out of work early? And in those times, I'm always more than willing to be flexible with them, just because I don't want them to miss like their kids, baseball game or dance recital or whatever it might be. I just try to, tell my employees like, hey, give me as much notice as possible. Then that way I can be, on the lookout for those situations, and we can be, really flexible and get you out of here on time. That way you can enjoy, your kids' activities. So like we were talking about a couple of minutes ago, who's going to support Social Security? So a number of workers per retiree. So, in the 1950s, we have 7 workers per 1 retiree, and by 2040, we're going to have, about 2 workers per retiree? So, here we're almost to 2020, so we're about 3.5 workers per retiree. So we're starting to see a ton of people retiring. I know when I started working for CEFCU about 5 years ago, they came, or the HR came in, kind of did their, initiation spiel and told us that, when I was coming in, within the next 5 to 10 years, 70% of the workforce at CEFCU was going to be retiring. So that was just kind of a huge number to me that kind of stuck out, which is, it's been great for me just because I've been able to kind of, go up through the ranks a little bit quicker than I would have maybe 20 years ago when the workforce wasn't retiring. And yeah, it's just kind of what we're seeing, not just at CEFCU, but throughout the business landscape, where a lot of people are retiring. So you're able to kind of step into a job that might pay a little bit more, or it might be a little more responsibility from an early age, just because those positions do need to be filled. So whenever we're talking about diversity, I mean, all these things come into play. So the U.S. Equal Opportunity Commission prohibits laws discriminating against age, disability, genetic information, national origin, pregnancy, race, religion, sex, anything along those lines. I mean, whenever you're in an interview, you can't ask somebody how old they are. Can't ask them about any sort of like religious questions or anything like that. So pretty much anything associated with here, I try to stay clear from whenever I'm interviewing anybody, and even really just in general, office kind of conversations. I try to stay away from it as much as possible. So the global environment, globalization has grown due to efficient distribution systems and communication systems such as the internet. Then we've got the war on terrorism down here. They've drained trillions of dollars from the U.S. economy. Money is diverted to the war effort and adds to the cost of insurance and security. So, I mean, that has had a huge impact on the United States. And how global changes affect you. As businesses expand to serve global markets, new jobs will be created, and rapid changes create a need for continuous learning. So that's one thing. If you think you're going to be done with education once you get done here at Lincoln Land, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. It's one of those things. I mean, you're going to have to be learning at every job that you're ever at, and that's not a bad thing, because it keeps everything interesting. It keeps you engaged as you're going through, your career. So, I'm a huge proponent of education. I'm all for it. So I mean, even when you get done here at Lincoln Land, if you start a career, don't let that be the end of your education. I mean, go back, go get a bachelor's degree, go get a master's degree. Even if you're not getting those degrees, get certifications in something. So I'm all about the education, and that's only going to help you in your career. the ecological environment. So climate change, that's just one of the things that's really a hot topic right now in the United States. Are you a believer in climate change? You're not a believer. I'm not going to get into the whole politics behind it. Looks like science is there to kind of provide you the proof that you might need. You've got greening, the trend towards saving energy and producing products that cause less harm to the environment. So a couple of the things out there right now. Many companies say the evidence for climate change is overwhelming, such as General Electric, Coca-Cola, Shell, Nestle, DuPont, Johnson Johnson, British Airways, Shanghai Electric. Just dealing with more electric, automobiles. Better products that aren't as draining on our natural resources. So just different things to think about whenever you're thinking about the global environment. So progress in agriculture, manufacturing, industry. So we're right here in the heartland where we have tons of agriculture all around us. I grew up on a farm. My wife, she grew up on a farm. So ag is a really big part of our lives growing up and still part of our lives even as we get older. So the 1800s, the agricultural industry led economic development. Technology like the harvester and cotton gin made large-scale farming successful. This led to fewer farmers with larger farms. So that's kind of the things that we see right now, especially like with the smaller farmers. I've got tons of old neighbors who only farmed a couple hundred acres, and they're getting out of it just because they're not able to keep up with the pace of everything. The cost of equipment is so high right now that the smaller farmers are kind of getting weeded out for these bigger farmers who are have really big operations, whether it be a couple thousand acres on up. So, industrialization of the 19th and 20th centuries moved jobs from farms to factories, and as technology improved productivity, fewer workers were needed for these factories as well. So, just kind of one of these things like the harvester and the cotton gin, you don't need people, out in the fields working anymore whenever you have a machine able to do the job for you. So as technology has increased productivity and made farmers more efficient, allowing for larger farmers, this trend has helped reduce the increase in price of some food for consumers, but has also reduced the number of small family-run farms. Does this new technology also help smaller farmers compete? If so, how? So I would say yes and no. I mean, like I was talking a couple of minutes ago, as far as like corn and soybeans go, I mean, some of the new technology has helped these smaller farmers just because they're able to get more done with less time, but at the same time the cost of the equipment and the cost of this new technology is so high that these smaller farmers can't afford to do it. But whenever you look at kind of like these smaller, kind of like organic farms, different things like that, I mean, technology has definitely helped them just from how they're able to reach people all over the world. So, I mean, when you look at like the internet, a mom and pop organic shop right here in Central Illinois can have a global presence just because of different things like Facebook, any sort of social media that's out there and that sort of thing. So I mean that's a pretty cool thing that's going on right now, especially with there's being more of a kind of a input on family-run farms, local, organic, farm to table, that sort of thing. So that's a pretty cool thing for the smaller farmers. So progress in service industries. Services make up over 80% of the value of the United States economy. Since the mid-1980s, the service industry generated almost all the increases in employment. There are more high-paying jobs in service industries now, just because, I mean, when you come down to it, a lot of the people don't want to, go into service industries that way. That's why people are getting paid a little bit more to go into those industries. So your future in business, we're in the midst of an information-based global and technology revolution. So definitely take advantage of it. I mean, we have a lot of resources here at Lincoln Land that can kind of help you get into a good situation. So, kind of going back to these service industries, we have a great thing with like HVAC technicians, if you want to get certified, be an electrician, carpenter, something along those lines. I mean, those are all service industries that are getting high-paying jobs. I got a tour of our Career Development Center, I think it is, here at Lincoln Land, and I was kind of blown away at everything that they had to offer there. So I was talking to the head of the HVAC department, and he was saying that, after was it 18 months, most of his students are getting out of that, and they're getting full-time jobs paying about $40 an hour. So, if somebody would have told me that when I was, 18, 19 years old, that I can be paid $40 an hour after 18 months of education, I would have probably jumped on that. But instead, I went to school for 6 years. I got a lot of student loans. So I guess you live and you learn.